Okay, so I think we're through with our whirlwind tour of the various controls available in ASP.NET. What we're going to do now is take a closer look at the HTML controls that we looked at the beginning. So let's just close the website that we have at the moment. Close solution. I'm not going to bother saving the example. We didn't really have anything too compelling, so let's just click on No there. And let's create a new website. File, new, website. Okay, I'm going to call this website HTML controls demo. Okay, and there's our familiar basic starting point. Let's just make the toolbox a little smaller to get a bit more real estate on the screen. There we are, super. And also, because we're going to be using the HTML controls, let's just close or minimize the standard tab, and let's just concentrate on the HTML tab here. Okay, very good. So let's just have a quick summary of what we already know. Remember, this is our first web page, and it has some basic HTML tags such as HTML and head, and it has a title, and it has a body, and inside the body we have a form, and we have this run@equals-server attribute, which I still haven't really explained properly, but I'm going to later on in this lesson. And then within the form we have a div, and the div gives us a place where we can put our various controls. So that's the basic starting point. I don't know if you noticed, but at the bottom of Visual Studio we have a trail, a collection of tags. This is quite handy. It lets you focus on a particular control on the web page, and it's quite useful if you want to select one of the non-visual controls or one of the controls that contains other elements. We'll see how to do this later by selecting HTML table rows. So for example, I could click on form and I could select the tag, and it selects the whole tag up here. Or alternatively, I could click on form and select tag content, and it just selects the internal part of the form, but without the start tag or the end tag. Okay, so let's add some controls to our HTML page. Let's just slip back into design mode. One of the things you often want to do in a web page is to control the layout of your text fields and buttons and labels so that they appear vertically aligned. As we saw in the first lesson, there's no easy way to control the alignment of controls on your web page. So the approach most people take is to use an HTML table. So let's add an HTML table onto our page. And I'm just going to make it a bit bigger. Let's just drag it out a little there. And I think it's deep enough as it stands. So this is an HTML table. We can add more columns or rows. We can delete columns or rows very easily. So for example, I can insert a column to the right. And I'm going to do that again. We're going to need 5 columns in this example. So let's insert another column to the right. So we currently have 5 columns. And if I want to, I can make the various columns bigger. I can just drag them out there, or smaller. Let's make the middle column smaller. That's just going to be a separator in our example. Okay, very good. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to add some basic text and text boxes and lists and checkboxes and a button. So all of these, we're going to use the basic HTML tags initially and see what level of functionality we have. And then later on, we're going to create another application called Web Controls Demo, and we'll see how to use the web controls on the standard tab, and we'll see how much easier that is. So first things first, let's just type in some static text in the first cell. This is where the user is going to enter their name. So let's just type in name, okay? Then in the second cell, I'm going to drag a text box. So that'll be an input text control. Let's drag that over there. You often have to just play around with the HTML table to make it look just right. But it's easy to do. Let's just make that a bit smaller as well. Okay, so there's my text control. Just come down to the properties here. Let's have a look at the various properties available. Now, bearing in mind that this is a simple input text control, as opposed to one of those functional ASP.NET text box classes, it's no surprise to find that the list of properties available is quite restricted. So, for example, I can set the maximum length to a smaller value than 2 billion. Let's set the maximum length to be 31. Okay, that's the maximum number of characters we're going to let the user enter for their name. And let's set the size property to be, well, let's just leave that at 20. That's the number of columns that will be displayed on the screen for the text control. And oh, one last thing, we should always set the ID to something meaningful. So let's set the ID for this control to be name text box. Okay, very good. And I quite like flitting back to the source view every time I add something, just to make sure that it's what I expect. So let's just quickly move to the source view. There's our input control, and it's got an ID, and it's got a maximum length, and it's a text box. So that's super. Let's come back to design view. Okay, I'm going to do something similar again. In the second row, I'm going to type in age, and then we're going to add another text control into the corresponding column. And let's set that ID to be age text box. Let's set the maximum length to be 3. So if somebody using this site is 100, then they can enter 3 digits. That should be enough. And we'll also set the size to be 3 as well. Very good. Now then, what we'll do next is we're going to add a list or select control. So first of all, let's come up to the first row and type in some static text. So this is where the user is going to specify their nationality. Oh, I just need to make that table column the right size. Okay, so let's add a select control onto that table cell. Select, and just pop it. There we go. I'll just make it a little bit bigger. And there's our select control. Let's just have a look at the properties available. First of all, we'll set the ID to something a little bit better. So, for example, nationality list.